Welcome to our episode of College Briefing. Today, we're diving into a mix of intriguing updates that have caught our attention. First off, over in New Mexico, lawmakers are rolling up their sleeves to tackle college enrollment and graduation challenges. They're cooking up policy changes and stirring in some funding for scholarships to make college less of a financial headache for students. It's like they're trying to add some extra cheese on the educational pizza, making it more appealing for everyone. Keep an eye on how this unfolds, especially with U.S. Senator Martin Heinrich and U.S. Representative Melanie Stansbury tossing their own ingredients into the mix with a bill aimed at expanding student support services nationwide. Switching gears to a global perspective, we've got a study that's practically dropping our jaws to the floor. It's predicting a staggering social change, with a global baby bust leading to shrinking populations in almost every country by the end of this century. Imagine that. It's like the world's having a massive clearance sale on babies, and almost no one's buying. This baby bust is setting the stage for some serious head-scratching on how to keep economies buzzing without the buzz of new babies. Countries might have to roll out the red carpet for immigrants or get creative in reorganizing their societies. It's a plot twist that could rival any blockbuster movie. Lastly, let's jet over to the political realm, where the European Union is eyeing a defense pact with Japan. It's like they're trying to add some extra muscle to their squad in the Indo-Pacific region, all while keeping an eye on China's moves on the chessboard. This potential pact could involve everything from naval exercises to cyber threats responses, showing that the EU is keen on flexing its geopolitical strategy muscles. However, experts are chiming in, suggesting that while it's a significant move, it might not shake the regional security scene too much. It's a bit like adding a new player to a sports team. It's exciting, but the game's outcome might not change overnight. So, there you have it, folks. From educational reforms in New Mexico to global population shifts and strategic defense pacts, the world's never short of fascinating developments. Please stay tuned for more detailed content on these stories. New Mexico State, federal lawmakers look to boost college enrollment, graduation. Yahoo! New Mexico State and federal lawmakers are working on policy changes to help alleviate the strain and instability of college, according to an article in the Santa Fe New Mexican. New Mexico has already signed a bill to help fund the state's Opportunity Scholarship, which pays for up to 100% of tuition for state residents at 2- and 4-year public colleges for those later in life. U.S. Senator Martin Heinrich and U.S. Representative Melanie Stansbury have put forth a bill to expand student support services at colleges and universities across the country. World faces staggering social change this century amid global baby bust. South China Morning Post. A major study has warned that the population of almost every country will be shrinking by the end of the century, due to baby booms in developing nations and busts in rich ones. The fertility rate in half of all nations is already too low to maintain their population size, according to the study by the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation, IHME. By 2050, the population of 3/4 of all countries will be shrinking, and by the end of the century that will be true for 97% of countries. The study estimates that only 6 countries will have fertility rates exceeding the replacement level of 2.1 births per female in 2100. The researchers warned that these trends will necessitate reorganizing societies and reliance on open immigration to sustain economic growth. However, World Health Organization experts caution that there are limitations to the projections, including a lack of data from many developing nations. EU looks to Japan for defense pact amid worrying shift in regional dynamic. South China Morning Post. The European Union (EU) is reportedly seeking a security deal with Japan to boost its engagement in the Indo-Pacific region as a counter to China. The agreement may involve cooperation on naval exercises, intelligence sharing, and responses to cyber threats. However, observers do not expect China to overreact to the deal as it is unlikely to have a significant impact on regional security. The EU has been actively seeking to strengthen defense ties with allies in the region, including the Philippines, Vietnam, and Australia. The proposed security pact with Japan aligns with the EU's broader geopolitical strategy and commitment to fostering partnerships in the Indo-Pacific. However, experts note that the EU does not have a meaningful independent security role, as its defense forces rely on contributions from member states and it lacks hard assets. China is likely to be more concerned about individual European countries making security pacts with Japan than the EU-Japan agreement. Japan has been increasing its security cooperation with Western countries in recent years to counter the threat posed by China, Russia, and North Korea. UAE piles into African deals to outdo rivals like China, France. Bloomberg. The United Arab Emirates, UAE, is positioning itself as a major investor in Africa, pledging more foreign direct investment, FDI, in the continent's economies than any other country. The UAE's investments are focused on renewable energy, logistics, technology, real estate, and agriculture. The country has pledged $44.5 billion in FDI for 2023, nearly twice that of China, which came in second. The UAE's interest in Africa extends beyond investment, with the country also playing a role in domestic political affairs in countries such as Libya, Sudan, and Ethiopia. UAE-based companies are focusing on Africa's better developed economies, including Egypt, Morocco, South Africa, and Kenya. The UAE's investments in Africa are driven by the country's desire to secure geopolitical clout and diversify its economy away from oil and gas. The UAE is also seeking to compensate for its weaknesses, such as its reliance on food imports, by investing in agriculture in countries such as Sudan, Zimbabwe, and Angola. A more European NATO. Foreign affairs. NATO's overdependence on the US is its biggest problem and could hinder its ability to respond to future threats, according to Rachel Rizzo, the director of programs at the Center for a New American Security. She adds that even if European NATO members met the alliance's goal of contributing 2% of GDP towards defense, their efforts would not significantly reduce Europe's military dependence on Washington. However, she believes that Europe can shore up its defense by integrating its efforts, which would require greater coordination both within the EU and between the EU and NATO. Rizzo states that NATO should act as Europe's combatant command, while the EU should act as NATO's investment and procurement arm. To achieve this, the EU would need its own defense budget, funded by joint EU borrowing, member state contributions, or increasing revenue sources through tariffs, pan-European taxation, or other means. Investors hire counsel to challenge $1 billion UC Muni deal. Bloomberg. A group of investors has hired law firm Kramer Levin to challenge a $1 billion refunding deal by the regents of the University of California, according to a letter seen by Bloomberg and people familiar with the situation. At the crux of the debate is whether the taxable debt can be replaced by lower-cost tax-exempt bonds under a call provision that may be invoked in the occurrence of an extraordinary event. The letter did not name the investors that the firm is representing. They may not agree on how to define DEI, but that's no problem for Kansas lawmakers attacking it. Associated Press. Kansas lawmakers are joining fellow Republicans in other states in trying to restrict diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives on university campuses, but they've drafted their proposals to avoid having to agree on how to define DEI. The Kansas House planned to vote Thursday on a bill aimed at preventing universities, community colleges, or technical colleges from basing a student's admission or an employee's hiring or promotion on any statement or pledge about diversity, equity, or inclusion. While the bill includes those words, it also says universities cannot require a statement about any political ideology or movement. In Pennsylvania's Senate race, Casey puts greedflation and corporations on the ballot. Associated Press. Democratic Senator Bob Casey of Pennsylvania is leading the charge against greedflation, a term he has coined to describe corporations that raise prices and take advantage of consumers to maximize profits. Casey argues that consumer prices are high primarily because of greedflation, as well as shrinkflation, where companies reduce product size slightly in order to raise prices. He has taken on the job of attacking greedflation with gusto, spending more time attacking it than his actual opponent in the upcoming election. Casey's argument aligns with populist politics and the concerns of labor unions, making him a favorite among those groups. However, economists do not subscribe to either side's explanation of inflation, pointing out that many factors have contributed to rising prices, including supply chain shortages, a strong labor market, and energy and food bottlenecks. Casey's focus on corporate profiteering is seen as a political move to shift blame for policy-induced inflation. While voters may buy into the argument that companies are taking advantage of inflation, that does not necessarily translate into support for Biden and the Democrats. Grisly teen murder case shocks China and shines a light on left behind children. CNN. The alleged murder of a 13-year-old boy by his classmates in rural northern China has shocked the nation, igniting heated debates about school bullying, juvenile crime, and the plight of tens of millions of children raised in the absence of their migrant worker parents. 3 teenagers have been detained by police on suspicion of killing the boy at their junior high school in a village on the outskirts of Handan City in Hebei Province, after his disfigured body was found buried in an abandoned greenhouse, state media reported last week. Authorities in Handan said the boy, identified by his surname Wang, was killed on March 10, and that all suspects were taken into police custody the following day. The crime had apparently been planned, as investigators had found the suspects started digging Wang's shallow grave a day before he was killed, according to police. Protein in muscles plays key role in recovery after exercise, study finds. South China Morning Post. A protein called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF, plays a crucial role in recovery following exercise, according to a study on mice. The international team of scientists found that BDNF signals to the body to replenish energy reserves in muscles after a workout. The protein, which was initially identified in the brain, was found to be essential for exercise-induced metabolic recovery and remodeling in skeletal muscle. The researchers said the findings could be used to improve sports performance and help athletes shorten their recovery time between training sessions. Smoking may increase belly fat, study suggests. The Independent. Smokers may have more belly fat, particularly visceral fat, compared to non-smokers, according to research from the University of Copenhagen. Visceral fat is linked to a higher risk of heart disease, diabetes, stroke, and dementia. Smoking was found to increase the amount of visceral fat, regardless of factors such as socioeconomic status, alcohol use, ADHD, or risk-taking behavior. The study also suggested that tobacco exposure before birth and starting smoking in childhood or adolescence is associated with the development of type 2 diabetes later in life. Community paramedics ease pressure on doctors in stretched healthcare system. ABC. A trial in Australia is exploring the use of community paramedics to provide healthcare services in rural areas. The paramedics, trained to treat and manage chronic diseases, are offering weekly drop-in health checkups in towns where access to doctors is limited. The program aims to reduce hospital admissions and alleviate pressure on rural GPs. Early indications suggest that a similar model in Canada has led to a 25% reduction in ambulance call-out rates. The trial is part of a collaboration between local community health services and universities in Australia and Canada. Political earthquake shakes up succession battle in Vietnam. Bloomberg. Vietnam's President Vo Van Thuong has resigned, leaving a leadership void in one of Asia's fastest-growing economies. The ouster marks a new phase of political uncertainty in the Communist Party's 5-decade rule. The country, which has a capitalist bent, has benefited from an investment boom as multinational corporations look to diversify their supply chains away from China. Nearly every country's population will be shrinking by 2100, study warns. Al Jazeera. A major study published in The Lancet has warned that fertility rates in nearly every country will be too low to sustain their populations by the end of the century. The study, carried out by the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation at the University of Washington, found that by 2100, populations in 198 of 204 countries will be shrinking. The majority of births are projected to take place in poor countries, with sub-Saharan Africa expected to account for 1 in every 2 children born in 2100. The demographic shift will result in a divide between baby boom and baby bust countries, with wealthier nations struggling to maintain economic growth and poorer nations grappling with the challenge of supporting their growing populations. The study emphasized the need for action to address climate change, improve healthcare infrastructure, reduce child mortality rates, and prioritize women's reproductive rights, family planning, and education for girls. Extreme heat at work can double stillbirth risk, India study finds. Yahoo! Working in extreme heat can double the risk of stillbirth and miscarriage for pregnant women, according to new research from India. The study involved 800 pregnant women in the southern Indian state of Tamil Nadu. About half of those who took part worked in jobs where they were exposed to high levels of heat, such as agriculture, brick kilns, and salt flats. The others worked in cooler environments, such as schools and hospitals, although some workers were also exposed to very high levels of heat in those jobs too. The study found that women who worked in similar conditions to Sumathi, who picked cucumbers in an environment of around 30 degrees, were twice as likely to suffer a stillbirth or miscarriage than those working in cooler environments. There is currently no official international advice for pregnant working women in the heat. The main guidance that does exist for hot weather working is based on studies involving a man in the U.S. military in the 1960s and 70s, weighing 70 to 75 kilograms and with 20% body fat. Professor Jane Hurst, one of the scientists who contributed to the study, said that the UK is getting hotter summers, and while it's not as hot as India, these adverse effects, on pregnancies, can be seen at much lower temperatures in more temperate climates, such as the UK. In the UK, the average temperature is projected to rise by nearly 3 degrees by the end of the century, compared with pre-industrial times. The mechanisms around how and why heat impacts pregnant women and their growing babies are not well understood. One theory is that when the mother gets too hot, blood could be diverted away from the fetus, to help cool the mother down. The researchers said that for the study in India, they used what is called the wet bulb globe temperature, WBGT, which measures the effects of temperature, humidity, wind speed, and radiant heat on human bodies. WBGT readings are often lower than the temperatures you might see forecast on the TV or a weather app. The safe heat threshold for people doing heavy work is 27.5 C WBGT, according to the U.S. Occupational Safety and Health Administration. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the stagge team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of stagge brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the stagge team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize stagge brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, staggebrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive stagge brief via email.